Our next speaker is a friend and fellow enthusiast of the Civil War, Mr. Starke Miller. If any of you want to go on a once-in-a-lifetime tour of Oxford, Mississippi, call that fellow. He does a great tour of Oxford, Shiloh. He is considered to be the authority on Company A of the 11th Mississippi. Is it working?
Operator error.
He's considered by everyone to be the expert on the university grades. And Starke is a fellow who is sought after as a speaker, as a tour guide, as a knowledgeable person, and maybe the most red and blue guy for Ole Miss that maybe ever lived. He's got a museum basically at his house of Ole Miss memorabilia. I like to collect things, but he said he once had, I don't remember how many different, I'm not making this up, I promise you. He's got about, I don't know how many records of Archie Manning songs that came up about Archie Manning. I mean, it's unbelievable, the collection he's got. But he is going to talk about what my grandfather always told me. He said, you know, Jack, the Yankees came down here and burned our courthouse in Ripley and a lot of the buildings in Ripley. And he still remembered his grandfather being killed by the Union Army. Starke is going to talk about the incendiary propensity of the Union Army to come through this area and burn towns. So welcome, Starke Miller.
New Raymond, hand these out, please. These are 50 burned towns on my list. I need y'all's help. Jack, the good Lord never let anybody to Ole Miss. You're not exactly bucking for Alumni of the Year, are you? It's true, pretty close. The good Lord led a few of us chosen through their 2, 4, 6, 7 years with our morals intact, and that's the greatest miracle that went on there as far as I'm concerned. I do have my stopwatch, so I'll get y'all out of here on time, good Lord willing. Graham, thank you for this. Thank you for what you do here. This is amazing. I am very impressed. You and the rest of the board, thank you guys so much. There are a few individuals, and I never can get up and not mention a few individuals. There are a few other people that the good Lord led through and got through Ole Miss with their values intact, their morals intact. Van East, my favorite pharmacist from Ole Miss, Hotty Toddy Van. Maury Shue, thank you for doing so much for me on my Shiloh tours about 3 years. You got me cranked up that year, and it made a difference to me. Leonard Kurgoshian, Leonard, you are the real deal here. Old Army Colonel, God bless you and thank you for everything you did. Some of us get up and talk about military. You went and did military, hotty toddy, and thank you so much. My long-suffering camp commander, Larry Martis, is here. Larry, God bless you and thank you for everything you've done. I am going to talk about burned towns. Thank all of you for showing up. If you weren't here today, I'd have to go back out in the church cemetery I came through on the way and go talk to the dead people. So I've got y'all to talk to instead. I love what I do. I'm the most fortunate Ole Miss rebel in existence. I'm going to talk about burned towns and farms in Mississippi starting in 1862 and going to 1864. What is a burned town? I've never seen a town completely burned to the ground, nothing left, except for the little town of Wyatt. Wyatt was dying in Lafayette County. It was almost gone. It consisted of a lot of log huts by then, by 1862 or 3, when it got burned. Abbeville, right north of Oxford, probably has 12 homes in it, 5 stores, a railroad depot. It is burned as completely as any real town I've ever seen. Only 2 houses were left by the end of the war. It was burned several times, and it's Grant going up and down the Mississippi Central Railroad. The start for me was Oxford, Mississippi. I knew Oxford had been burned, and that was a big deal to me doing Ole Miss and Oxford history. I knew Jackson, the state capital, had been burned, called Chimneyville, been burned 4 times by the end of the war. The people getting off the train almost a mile away from where the train station had been and walking into Jackson at the end of the war, all they could see was a forest of chimneys, so it became Chimneyville. That's about all that was left. Good Lord, thank goodness the old Capitol building still stands. That is a miracle. I found out Ripley had been burned 1 month before Oxford, Mississippi, in the same exact manner by the same exact Union General, A.J. Whiskey Smith. My joke is I would spit after I say his name, but I won't do that on this nice floor. I found 23 burned towns about 7 or 8 years ago, and I was talking to Alan Doyle in Memphis, part of the forest camp, and he said, Starke, would you come speak to my camp about that? And I said, of course. So I showed up. For 100 people there. I spoke that night for nearly an hour. I'm not going to do that to y'all today. Those 100 people gave me more burned towns. They showed me more. This is not my main area of research by any stretch. University grades and Ole Miss and Oxford. This has been a side show to what I've done. I have not spent a whole lot of time on this. Each winter, since I've moved to Oxford, I try to do a large research 1 or 2, 3, 4 large research projects when it's cold and rainy and bad out, and I'm not walking cemeteries and not giving tours. 2 winters ago, I went back and worked on burned towns as hard as I ever have. From 23 that I had 8 years ago, I now have 50. There's nothing terribly special about a 50, but it is a nice round number. It shocked me to end up with 50. And the fact is, I know there are more out there that I have not found yet. Over that winter, I found 2 things I had not seen. I'd seen newspapers.com about 8 or 9 years ago. I don't think it was word searchable. I don't remember that it was, and they have expanded their database greatly in the last few years. I went through newspapers.com on their word searchable database, and I was shocked. The other crazy thing I found, there's a man in America crazier than I am, hard to believe. He transcribes Civil War letters and puts them up online. He calls his site Spared and Shared. He's got well over 10,000 Civil War letters up there. So when Oxford gets invaded 4 times, from 62 to 64, the first time it's at least 50,000 Yankees there in Oxford. Those guys write letters. When I sat down and went through Spared and Shared, I started finding in the Yankees' own words what they had burned through Mississippi. The one article I've had for 20 plus years, and I've got my glasses on my face, the one article I've had for 20 plus years, I didn't trust because it's a Memphis newspaper article. There's no signature on it. And it says, between LaGrange, Tennessee and Oxford, Mississippi, a distance of 55 miles, not more than half a dozen residences were left upon the roadside. The rest were burned. In a 55-mile stretch, almost everything but 6 houses were burned. That's got to be about 100 houses. That shocked me. That was the only source I had on it, and I wouldn't use it, and I wouldn't tell people about it, and I certainly didn't use that publicly. But when I went to Spared and Shared and newspapers.com, those towns and the houses burned started popping up. Again, in their own words. There are 4 main burning times in the state of Mississippi. In 1862, Grant is on his overland campaign. He thinks to get to Vicksburg. He ends up in Oxford, and because he gets his supply depot raided at Holly Springs, he has to turn around and go back to Memphis. That's the first of the burning. Vicksburg, in 1863, the Vicksburg campaign and the Louisiana campaign in 64, all up and down the Mississippi River. I'm a native Memphian. I love that river. I grew up with it. All up and down the river, towns and houses got burned by the Union Navy. 1864 is Sherman's Meridian raid. He goes from Vicksburg to Jackson to Meridian to destroy that railroad town, and he burns his way across. 1864, they're chasing Forrest. 3 Union generals tasked with catching Forrest. More burning happens through 64 in North Mississippi. Grant's overland campaign in 62, he comes to Oxford, he loses his supply base. His soldiers, it's wintertime, it's cold, it's raining. They have gotten to Oxford and a little bit below to Coffeyville and Water Valley, and they are so disappointed to have to turn around and go back, not having accomplished their goal of getting to Jackson and then to Vicksburg. They are mad. They are angry. On the way back from Oxford, Mississippi to Holly Springs, they burn. They burn the roadside houses. They get to Holly Springs, and they burn portions, large portions of Holly Springs. What I end up with is 1/3 of Holly Springs burned. Philip Kalneck, the historian up there, doesn't believe me. He says, oh, Stark, all the big houses are here. Yes, they are. It was the small houses and the parts of the square, about a half of the square get burned. The Confederates do some of that. They blow up the eastern side of the square. Part of the north side of the square catches on fire, but the Yankees burned the Magnolia Hotel. They burned 2 or 3 stores on the south side, and they burn houses like you wouldn't believe. Again, most people live in a little 2-room or 3 or 4-room wooden house, and the large houses get guards. The little small houses get no guards, and they are burned. They are gone. That is what gets burned there. In 1864, let's go back to 63, Alexandria, Virginia, or 64, Alexandria, Virginia is burned by A.J. Whiskey Smith. And then in 64, Sherman's Meridian Raid. Sherman burns his way across for 135 miles. He burns 12 towns on the Meridian Raid. Again, when I tell Southerners 50 towns in Mississippi, nobody's ever seen this, nobody's ever heard this before. There's no book, there's no article, Journal of Mississippi History, or nowhere else. There's no list of this. I just started keeping my own list, and it has shocked me for well over 10 years now to find out all this. In 64, A.J. Whiskey Smith is chasing Forrest. He gets to Oxford, Mississippi, looking for Forrest. That has been Forrest's base of supply and base of operations through the first 6 months of 1864. A.J. Whiskey Smith comes to Oxford to catch him, comes out of Memphis. Forrest goes straight over to Panola or Batesville, and then he heads straight north, and he raids Smith's base at Memphis. When A.J. Whiskey Smith is sitting on his horse on the north side of the courthouse, a rider comes up to him, and I always add the word, you dummy. You dummy, you're down here looking for Forrest in Oxford. Forrest was at your base last night of Memphis. Out of pure anger, A.J. Whiskey Smith orders the courthouse burned, all the businesses on the square burned. There are 5 houses, in fact, burned. There are other houses set on fire, and I'm still finding more on that are put out. First Presbyterian Church is set on fire and put out. A.J. Whiskey Smith orders the University of Mississippi burned. The 2 young captains, 2 young cavalry captains sent out there to burn the university, decide not to carry out such a vandal order on their own. They do not get in trouble for that later that night when they go back to see A.J. Whiskey Smith. He does finally laugh about it and say, guys, don't worry about it. The beloved Lyceum building, which is the symbol for the university, the 6 columns on there, still stands due to the guts and integrity of 2 young Yankee captains. I've asked through the Chancellor's right-hand men twice, would the university do anything for those families if we can find them? They told me yes. Unfortunately, that was either Vitter or Jones got fired about 6 months later, so I did not get that done. That is still on my list of things to do, good Lord willing, someday. But because they get to Oxford and they don't catch Nathan Bedford Forrest, they have to turn around and leave and go back to Memphis. They do it in 62 when they lose their supply depot and have to turn around and go back mad. In 64, when they can't catch Forrest, all those Union troops, 18,000 the second time, have to turn around and go back to Memphis mad in the rain. It's the rainiest August anybody's ever seen. They're sleeping in the mud. They don't have their tents with them. It's a horrible time for them. They burn their way back to Holly Springs. They burn portions and houses and public buildings in Holly Springs. A.J. Whiskey Smith, on the way down, puts about 20 or 30 Union prisoners by their own provost guard in the Holly Springs courthouse. Those 20 or 30 prisoners start a diversionary fire. They're going to try to escape from their own provost guard. That diversionary fire burns the whole courthouse to the ground there in Holly Springs, Mississippi. Again, that's, Whiskey Smith doesn't order that. He does order Oxford courthouse being burned. I wish the Yankees had stayed at home and we didn't have anything burned. They burned their way all the way back again. Burning in 1864, we have not talked about burning in Georgia, South Carolina, or the Valley in Virginia. That is only Mississippi that I've been able to find. I've not dug into those others at all. That's for other state historians. The war in Mississippi in 1864 concludes with that final burning. Let's see, I've got some extra minutes. Let me give you just a very, very few quotes. This is a letter, this is a Memphis Daily Appeal, and this is this is one of about 6 sources I finally found on this total. Nearly all, if not every residence between Oxford and this city was burned. There's a second source. I've already read you the first. Here's Army correspondence from the New York World, writing from LaGrange, Tennessee. As soon as General Grant's army commenced falling back from Coffeyville and Oxford, every house not guarded was burned or an attempt was made to burn it, especially in Holly Springs. And the city was only saved from total destruction by placing an entire regiment on duty. The very first town burned in 1862 is Water Valley. Yankees have gotten their noses smacked real good at Coffeyville. And when they do that and they have to turn around and go back to Oxford, the next day they burned Water Valley on the way back to Oxford. That's the first town burned in 1862 in December. Here's a Union letter out of Spared and Shared. I have, I think, 8 copies of my major sources for anybody who's very serious about that and wants them. I'll give them to you to show you all this is absolutely true as it gets. A letter out of Spared and Shared from Union Man. The boys have plundered all they could since coming to this place, talking about Holly Springs, plundered all they could since coming to this place against orders. The boys seize many fancy articles of no earthly use to them and which they destroy or throw away when they march. We're not talking about burning. I'm also telling you about all the destruction, all the vandalism, and all the theft that goes on. There is not a house, hardly a house in North Mississippi that escapes that. Again, another Union letter. We marched to Holly Springs. We stayed there about 10 days, and this is coming back from Oxford. The 2 last nights we stayed there, they was great nights with the soldiers. They was burning buildings all night long. It looked as if the whole town was on fire. The sight looked nice. That Union soldier liked what he saw, a southern town burning. They tell me I've got a little bit of feeling about all this. Please forgive me, please excuse me. After that last winter, I finally broke down and started calling them damn Yankees. Again, my mama wouldn't approve of that. The old joke is I never knew damn Yankees was 2 words till I was 12. Let's see if I finish up with 1 or 2 more. I'm not going to do that to you. I'm going to yield the rest of my time, which is a miracle. I've never done that before. And, talk my ears off.